All right, so this is after I've imported and I've called their session. So I usually call with flags, just a quick yes or no. And then I gave them their proofs over Pixieset. And then what you see highlighted in red are pics that she has made for definite yes prints. We're still working on kind of the final grouping from this, but she definitely knows that absolutely yes on these photos. So what I would do first is, well, I do my basic crop first. So I typically print out a 5x7 and then put it in a mat that fits an 8x10 and it fits an 8x10 box. So these are all already cropped to 5x7. But that's really always my first step. And then I will just adjust kind of the levels. So you can actually see I did some basic adjustments over here on the right for her proofing. Originally, it was just a tiny bit bright. So I adjusted some highlights, brought that down to be a little even. I put the shadows up just a little bit, and then that was my export for proof. So from here, I would just, again, check my levels. I mean, everything looks pretty good. Usually what I'm looking for is integrity and skin tones for a portrait. Like I don't want anything to be blown out or too dark. I have my clipping warning on. Can you see that little blue right there? It's super. So that actually tells me it's pure black. I mean, that amount of tininess, pure black, is not a big deal to me. But if there was a big section of pure black, that means I have no detail anywhere, and I would want to adjust that.
Gotcha.
And you actually can turn that on and off just by clicking J on the keyboard. Do you see these little boxes over here going on and off?
So our faces are covering them.
Oh.
No, it's on my side. Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah, so these little boxes are just telling me that my clipping warnings are on and off. If I'm being super picky, one thing I do see here is the bottom of the picture is a little darker than the top of the picture. So I will make that adjustment with the gradient tool, and I will just bring it up a little bit here and maybe like give it a tiny bit more increase. So just so you can see the difference there, that's before, that's after, just evening out the tone a little bit. But really, once I've got tone figured out, I just head to Photoshop. You got any questions about the typical stuff here? Like I don't touch any of this. No vignette.
No.
My white balance, this is the benefit of shooting with a flash, is I always set my white balance the same so I get perfect color because I know the temperature of my flash. It's so helpful. All right, so then when I go into Photoshop, this is where the real work begins. But again, you'll see it's super fast. Assuming my computer enjoys Photoshop and Zoom at the same time. There we go.
Right, that's what I was going to ask. So do you just open it from Lightroom into Photoshop right away, and then do you close it out and it's back in Photoshop? Okay.
Yeah, so if I right click on it and then open it to Photoshop, and then once I save it here, it'll just give me the updated version in my Lightroom catalog, which makes organizing still really easy. Okay, so in here, the next thing I'll do is just quick blemish removal. So I'll use the spot healing brush. That samples automatically. If it's a really complicated heal, I'll use the healing brush tool. Then I have to sample it like you do the clone stamp. But this is just like the spot removal in Lightroom, where it samples from somewhere. But in Photoshop, it's just way better. It samples quicker, right? It also allows you to work faster. I feel like the Lightroom one kind of bogs down
Yeah.
and makes things run really slow. And I just edit right on the original file. Like, this is for client work. This is not like portfolio work or crazy edits. So I don't really care if I'm being destructive to the file, because chances are I'm not going back and looking at this. So at this point, I'm not working with layers. And that's basically it. This is going to print out a 5x7, right? So there's no point in me like coming super close. If I was going to print this on a poster, maybe I would, but he's looking pretty good.
Yeah.
So that's step one. The next step is where I spend most of my time, and this is dodging and burning. And I do dodging and burning with the history brush rather than the dodge and burn tool, which is, where is that? Is that here? Yeah. So I met a photographer years ago who turned me on to this, and I feel like I get a little more finesse with the history brush than I do with the dodge and burn tool. So this is my brush. My settings are the important part. So I have a 3% flow. So when I'm clicking on this, it's like really not doing too much at once. Like, you can barely even notice it while I'm painting it on. And the other important thing is, so to make it brighter, I'm in this screen mode up here. And I'll show you where I go to make it darker in a second. And so you saw, I started here right between the eyebrows. Usually that part is a little dark on people just because of the way our skulls are shaped. So I always even that out just a tiny bit. And I'll probably also just come under here and brighten up right under the eyebrows. And again, it's just evening things out. He's so young, I'm not going to do any retouching under his eyes, but I will make it a tiny bit brighter. I can see here, like, this is an area I just want a little brighter because we caught some shadow. Maybe my light was like a tad too high, but just kind of evening out the tone here. Everything else, I don't know, that looks pretty good. Maybe a tiny bit here. I don't want to get rid of everything though, because I don't want to lose dimension. So, and then I'm going to come back here. I change it from screen to multiply, and that's where I make things a little darker. I think I'll just do like a couple touches where it's super highlight. And it's a little tough to see when you're doing it gradually like this, but you'll see when I go back to Lightroom. I think I'm kind of done. Like, for client work, I think this is basically where I want to be when it comes to dodging and burning. I mean, he's so young, his skin looks so good. There's really not much to do. I might brighten this eye just a little, get a little color. There's a little too dark. I'm pretty sure I hit this just about perfectly with focus. So yeah, I mean, you can see all his eyelashes and everything. Sometimes I'll come in with, I have an action set for an unsharp mask. So that's sharpens the whole picture, but then I put an inverse mask on it so that nothing has been sharpened. And I'll use a paintbrush and just paint on where I want a little extra sharpening. So I typically will do that on the eyelashes and the eyes.
Oh, that's cool.
And so you can see in the mask, like, you can barely even see it, but over here, there's a little white dot where I painted on.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's probably all I would do to this photo. I guess if I'm being nitpicky, maybe, so I'll come back and flatten my layers. I could get rid of this crease. It must be a new shirt. And again, that's just that healing brush. That's so good.
Yeah.
You know, if I'm really trying to pay attention to this, like, say this was something I might submit for like a accreditation or awards, the only other tool that I'll come in and use is this liquify tool. Do you ever use that?
I used to use that a long time ago to like reshape things a little bit, but I haven't used it for a long time.
So I like might reshape his t-shirt a little bit to get rid of some bumps.
Gotcha.
but like just a tiny. I mean, really, I don't need to. He's looking pretty good here.
Yeah. So when you use when you're using the history brush now and you find it works better than a regular dodge and burn, does it still make it look you know how dodging and burning can sometimes, like when you're burning, it can make it look black? Like, does the history brush keeps like the colors the same?
Yes, it keeps the color integrity. That was the argument made to me when I was learning this, and I find that to be true. Is that dodge and burn, I believe, is working with like a gray layer and kind of increasing or decreasing it that way. And
Okay.
the history brush keeps color integrity. You know, if I'm looking at this right now, I wonder if I like.
That makes sense. I've never heard that before.
I might just bring this down a tiny bit all around. I think that looks better. I mean, it's so gradual. All right, I'm going to save this real quick and we'll just look at the comparison back in Lightroom.
Okay.
That's the first one. That's the second one. I mean,
sorry, I looked away.
It's really not a huge difference. And that's usually my goal. But you can just tell like tones are evened out a little bit. I mean, of course, you can see the difference with the tiny blemishes, but that's, you know,
right.
Anyone would expect.
Yeah, but definitely
it's just
polishes it up. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's all I'm trying to do. All right. So I'm going to do that process one more time, just on an adult who's, you know, had some extra years for their skin to be exposed to the sun and all that stuff, and just show a couple of techniques here. So like, you know, for him, thankfully, there's really not like any blemish work to do, especially because he's a guy that sometimes we'll keep, you know, the wrinkles or any skin imperfections because he's not wearing makeup. So it's not like we have to pretend like everything's perfect.
Right.
So really where my work's going to be is dodging and burning with him. And then one other tool. So again, like this is always a go-to spot to lighten up. I mean, you can see there, nothing changed with the color, right? It was just a brightness level. It's so great. I'll probably brighten this a little bit, but I do like this shadow that's happening. I'll come down here. So, and also I'm using the bracket keys just as my shortcut to make the brush bigger and smaller. So, oh, I'm also using a Wacom tablet. I'm using a pen.
Nice.
So that makes, like, painting and drawing is so intuitive.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Okay, right, because I can get super detailed.
You brightened under his eyes a little bit.
So here I'm going to use the clone stamp instead of dodging and burning. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sample just right below. And you can see my clone stamp settings. My flow is 10%. I'm actually going to bring it down. I'm going to put it at like 6. So it's really not a whole lot coming out. And I'm just going to add some of it there. So you can see I'm getting skin that's close by, but I'm keeping the detail a little bit that's underneath. So my goal always is don't get rid of texture because then it'll start to look fake.
Yeah, plastic.
Yeah, but I'll take, if you take skin that's just right underneath, then we're in much better shape. So here, look at the difference. So that was before.
Wow.
And
so
go ahead.
So if you were to just dodge that, it wouldn't look as nice as sampling from his skin that's just directly under his eye.
Right, because it's gonna bring up like all, so I'm like, half of what I'm doing is masking some texture because there's some texture that we don't want, but I'm still sort of keeping texture. And I'm also lightening it up because that part of his cheeks is brighter than here. So it's a little bit of skin smoothing with a different texture, and it's a little bit of brightening. If all I used was like the history brush to dodge, all it's doing is brightening some of this texture that we don't want. Like we want some of the texture, but not all of it. I'm just going to brighten up his eyes a little bit. I mean, if I'm printing this, this looks pretty good. I would be pretty happy with this. I might come in here and darken right here a tiny bit, just so my eye doesn't go there. So here, look the difference there. Not much, but like it's tiny little details.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll darken up the little ear here a tiny bit. You know, I could really go crazy with some frequency separation and maybe get rid of some of this shine. It's not crazy shine though. I might even be able to use the clone stamp. So I'm kind of oh no, that's too dark. But I'm okay with it. I mean, it doesn't look too crazy. That's really it. I mean, it's just like, so I use the clone stamp, I use the brush tool, I use healing, and I use the history brush.